Big John, what was going through your mind during Rory versus Robbie's second fight? The fight was brutal and it seemed to take a toll on the fighters. Did it impact you in a way?
Oh, what was going through my mind?
Yeah.
Truthfully, what was going through my mind as the fight was progressing was the sustainable damage that Rory McDonald was being inflicted upon him, as far as people not seeing the damage, but up close seeing it and understanding what it was doing. You know, we've talked about it before. The aspiration of blood, not the drinking of blood because he had a broken nose, but the aspiration, the aspirating of little blood particles as he's breathing heavily, going not into his stomach, but going into his lungs and starting to coat his lungs with blood so that the oxygen transfer becomes less and less as the fight goes on, almost to the point where you can get to the point you're starting to basically drown. He's not going to drown if he's not having an output of energy, but when you're fighting, obviously there's a huge output of energy and there's a need for that oxygen transfer. And I was really worried about watching him. I can tell you that as I was doing that fight, I watched Robbie Lawler in certain moments. When Rory would hurt him at times, I would look towards Robbie. But most of that fight, I was focused on Rory McDonald, making sure that he was doing the right things for me to allow him to stay in the fight and that he was being able to compensate for some of the problems that he was having. And you could see those problems. If I watched the fight with you, I would point them out to you. And, that was, it was a great fight, and Robbie sustained some damage, but all of Robbie's damage was what we call superficial damage. Cut to the lip that went through his lip, a big cut on top of that. Superficial, it's stitches and it's no big thing.
Yeah.
People get like squeamish about cuts. Cuts are nothing. It's all the internal things that are happening. And Rory had a lot of those. He was hit by some body shots that were big. His mouth was cut open in a couple of places where he was bleeding inside his mouth. The nose was broken, so he can't breathe out of the nose. So many little things that add up to big problems. That was what I was thinking about, and that's what I was dealing with in that
Rory is the typical guy that the people at the bar will say they can beat up.
Exactly.
And then they realize that he will fuck you up. And not only fuck you up, but he'll probably do it with a smile on his face.
And wearing glasses.
He is the guy that is just way too tough for his own good.
Yes.
You look at the Robbie fights. You look at his Carlos Condit fight where he was dominant until the very end. He didn't want to quit. The ref stopped it. Then you also look at the Lima fight, the very first one. Both of them. But the first one was just nasty intense because of the leg kicks, the calf kicks. Just too tough for his own good.
And when you talk about that fight, Josh, this is what people need to realize. You look at the damage to his leg. Okay, that wasn't temporary damage.
No.
That is permanent damage. He's, to this day, that muscle is torn off of the bone and it reattached, but it didn't reattach in its normal place. And the only way that he can make it normal is to have surgery that cuts open the entire front of his leg. And he's not going to be able to kick with it anymore. And he definitely won't be able to take any type of, damage through a kick with it. So he's let it go. These are the things that sometimes permanently there are little pieces of you that stay in that cage. Sometimes there's big pieces of you that stay in the cage that most people just don't see or understand.
Yeah, I can give you guys an example from my personal experiences. I have cauliflower inside my nose. And so most people talk about deviated septums. Well, I have cauliflower in the inside of my nose. And
scar tissue.
So I cannot basically, breathing is like breathing through a straw on the right side of my nose. And then I've got a deviated septum on the left side. So it kind of pushes into one side because of the cauliflower. So I have a harder time breathing. So if you look at some of my last, towards the end of my career, if I look like I always sometimes would take a step back and take a deep breath is because I needed to get that in. And I didn't have that in my earlier part of my career. There's little things that you develop throughout your career. I have something going on with my elbow, like my left elbow, the nerve is moved. And where you get a funny bone, that nerve is now exposed. So if I can't put my elbow down on the kitchen table,
put it on a thing. It's like,
yeah, I can't even put my elbow down on a kitchen table or or put my arm on a hard armrest because it sends a sharp pain down into my hand. So those are things that I dealt with for the last, 8 years of my career because I was afraid to take kicks on that side because if you kicked me and you hit that, my hand would turn on fire to the point of where I wanted to rip the glove off. there's just little tiny injuries. And now that I'm done fighting, I can go ahead and expose this. My left foot, I broke my ankle 3 times leading up to the second Gilbert Melendez fight. And I had a plate put in with 9 screws. Well, the plate, every time if you kick or if I check or if I kick your body and you block and it hits the elbow, it sends a sharp pain down my leg to the point where I can't even put my foot down. And so, and also, if you attack that ankle lock position, if you attack an ankle lock on that side, I have to tap automatically because there's no flex in my ankle whatsoever because of the plate. So there's little things that if you are like, hey, how can you didn't kick as much in the second Gilbert fight? Because I couldn't. Like I couldn't kick the body because if he blocked and it hit the elbow, I could have potentially broken my leg again, or it would have just sent so much pain up my leg, I wouldn't have been able to kick the rest of the fight. I would have been hampered the rest of the fight. So there's reasons why these fighters don't do things that they used to do in past fights or adjustments that they've had to make in the fighting style that they had before that was successful, but because of injury, they're not able to do anymore. You know, so there's a lot of things, man. I could go on and on about my wrist and my neck and all this other shit, but
let's compare necks.
Yeah, but you understand where I'm going with. But to touch on Rory, that's the same thing with Rory now. Whoever fights him is gonna know. Like if all I got to do is kick him 3 or 4 times in the calf, so he's got to be careful. Like he's got to be careful dealing with guys that are really good kickers.